What is there to look into? Because it's right in front of you. It's right here. Liberals have ruined police in Canada. Like the House Speaker. Here's your incredible House Speaker. This is what he had to say. And this is why. These people are the reason why policing in Canada has turned soft. On October 10th, I made a video. I woke up in the morning and I didn't post it because I disagreed with myself. I'm going to show you that towards the end of this video because it ties into everything that I'm about to say. Yeah, sometimes I don't agree with me. If you haven't noticed, the police are getting soft in Canada. Okay, there's a reason. I'm going to tell you why. There's a hatred against police from the media, from politicians, the liberal politicians, and now Canadian YouTubers, who I support every single one of them. There's not one I don't like. I've been watching these channels lately, and I'm like, oh man, can we please get it right? Stop saying the police don't do nothing. Stop saying this about the police. Why don't the RCMP just grab onto those documents? They're sticking up for Trudeau. They should just grab onto those documents and charge people. It's not how it works. Criminal Code of Canada, my criminal code. It has to be in here for them to grab onto those documents. Here's something you're not going to like. If there's a ton of cocaine inside a house, a cop can't just show up and ask the homeowner, hey, can I come in and take a look? Even if with consent. Okay, if they find the coke, it gets thrown out because they didn't write a warrant. The RCMP have to write a warrant for those documents for any charges to happen. Production order, it's called. If Trudeau hands over the documents, there's not going to be any charges. All somebody has to say is, some liberal in the background, hey, I'm in those documents, and I don't agree for you to read them. I get what this dingbat keeps telling us.
And let me tell you why, Mr. Speaker. Might have something to do with Rob Walsh, the former law clerk, who stated, it is an abuse of its powers for the House to use its power to demand and get documents from the government in order to transfer them to a third party that wouldn't otherwise receive them, or to compel the government to give documents to the third party. They want to get around the Charter of Rights and Freedom.
I don't know. I hate seeing Canadian YouTubers grab a page from the media because that's not why people come to watch us. They come to watch us because we're not the media. We're not CTV. We're not CBC. I don't want them to fall into that trap. I don't like seeing it. We got to get it right. You know, the other day, the RCMP commissioner came out and he started talking about India. Well, why'd he do that? Oh, Trudeau got him to do it. Do you not think that maybe he did it as a warning? Because of the case where, and I got to watch what I say, Wortman, where I think 22 people in the RCMP got raked over the coals because they didn't warn anybody. It's funny, you want them to warn, but then when they do, oh, it's because of this. You know, right when I became a police officer, David Eby, he was part of the civilian liberties, blah, 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 doesn't really matter. And every day he would go on the news. And I couldn't believe the things that he was saying about police. He was for the it rat. He always stuck up for the it rat and never the police. And I would go to work and I go, Dave, did you see that guy on TV? Isn't that amazing? That's not how it went down. That's what that guy was just a police hater. Still is. Wrote a book. Politicians are the absolute worst.
I watched in disgust yesterday a number of these incidents. When I first saw the report, I thought it was some morbid joke. Frankly, along with many Canadians, Indigenous peoples living in Canada, politicians, I'm pissed, I'm outraged. There needs to be a full accounting of what has gone on.
That's what he said after a police officer had to do what he had to do to Chantel Moore. He was backed into a corner because of Chantel Moore. And there was a knife. Is that what you're pissed at? You know what I'm pissed at? That she ruined that cop's life. A huge investigation was completed, and the cop was found to be fully justified. What did Mark Miller say about that after? Nothing. Liberals have ruined police in Canada, like the House Speaker. Trudeau does not have the police in his back pocket. Police, sorry guys, but they're not coming out and lying. They're not going to sacrifice their job to protect Trudeau. Maybe one, okay? I'll give you Brenda Lucky. The worst thing that ever happened to the RCMP. And this is the reason why the police are this way in Canada now. The reason why they're soft. And I don't like it because we need police, obviously. Remember grade 2? What do you want to do? I want to become a cop. I want to uphold the law. It's cool. Not anymore. Nobody's even applying anymore. We get mass immigration. We talk about building houses. We don't got police. Who's going to police this massive population boost? It hasn't been happening. Just look at the protests lately. They outnumber cops every single time. I'm flipping through my channel, and the House Speaker comes up. A couple of years ago, might have even been 3 years ago, and I'm like, what? I did a video about the House Speaker? This is what he said about the RCMP. A few things happen. Chantel Moore happens. Chief Adam Allen happens. Liberals get together, and they're like, we know why it's happening. It's systemic racism. Brenda Lucky comes out and says there is. Absolutely, it's in the RCMP. The Vancouver police chief came out and said, I'm offended that you even asked that question. Of course not. But not our commissioner. And by the way, I like our current commissioner now. That moment helped destroy the RCMP. So what do the Liberals do? They do a study. Huge. You paid for it. A study about something that doesn't exist. Systemic racism in the RCMP does not exist. But they're studying it. Oh, you better believe they came up with some results. During their study, this is the most amazing thing to me, and it should be to you, that I've ever seen. During their investigation into this, who do you ask? Who would have the results? Who would be able to give you a measurement, the results of it? The Civilian Review Board. If you want to determine how much racism is in the RCMP, you go to that board, you interview them. And that's what they did. They interviewed this broad. And you won't believe what she said.
In terms of the RCMP, I must highlight that the Commission's lens tends to focus on individual allegations of bias, discrimination, or racism. We do not get complaints of systemic racism as a rule.
And she just proved that there really isn't systemic racism because nobody's really complaining about it. Did you hear that? It's kind of a big deal, isn't it? We do not get complaints of systemic racism as a rule, huh? What do you mean? You're telling me that people aren't complaining? All your complainants the bad guys aren't complaining about systemic racism?
On average, we receive 3,000 to 3,500 complaints per year. Over the course of the past 5 years, we've received 76 complaints that deal with bias, racism, or discrimination.
Bias, racism, or discrimination. So 76 cases of it. We don't know how many cases of racism. She lumps it together with bias and discrimination and racism. 76 complaints. Let's just go ahead and say it's 76 complaints of racism, which it isn't. Now think about that for a second. 3,500 cases a year. That's 17,000. It's around 17,000 complaints that they have dealt with in the past 5 years. Out of all those cases, they got 76 cases of people complaining about racism. That's it. Now you better believe the people listening to this, and you're going to hear it, they didn't like the sounds of that. She just told you that nobody's complaining about systemic racism. Kind of a big deal, isn't it?
That number is quite low. I mean, can you just clarify,
You need more clarification, right? Just clarify. Okay, can you please clarify? Clarify what?
Clarify, given that there's a clear differential of results of racialized people, I hope you're not concluding that since there's low number of complaints based on racism, that there is little or no systemic racism within the RCMP.
I hope you're not. I hope you're not concluding that, because that would be very racist of you, you white privileged lady.
I just want to I'm trying to understand the statistics.
Hope you're not saying that. That's not what we want to hear. That's not going to support our results. Even after hearing the evidence, they concluded there's systemic racism in the RCMP. And the House Speaker and Pam the Crybaby came out and spoke to you about it.
As Vice Chief Terry Teague from
what'd he have to say?
British Columbia Assembly of First Nations explained to the committee, and I'm quoting, "In my language, we call the RCMP Nilchukan."
Nilchukan. I like that. It's got a nice ring to it. Thanks, Chief.
Which interpreted in our language is those who take us away.
Here's your incredible House Speaker. This is what he had to say. And this is why. These people are the reason why policing in Canada has turned soft.
If we are going to fight and combat systemic racism that exists in institutions such as the RCMP,
100% definitely exists in the RCMP, guys. Can't come up with an example. Can't do it. But it exists. Nobody complaining about it, but it exists. That's what he just told you. How can he be the House Speaker? How is that even allowed?
you have to make sure that you're collecting the data necessary to measure where you are. You just simply can't change what you can't measure.
It was measured. The results are in, but they lied to you.
And so I'd like to compliment the members of the Public Security Committee, under the chairmanship of Mr. McKay, and all the members who worked very hard to making sure that they heard from witnesses who were particularly concerned about how to ensure that the path forward will lead to less systemic discrimination, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous policing that could exist, that does exist in our system.
It does.
We know that our justice and public security institutions have marginalized Indigenous peoples, Black and racialized people in Canada. The overcriminalization of people of color perpetuates systemic racism.
No, it doesn't. It just means that they're committing crime. Too much crime.
And leads to worsening outcomes. We must actively seek better ways to move forward.
What way is that?
Our government is committed to building a more inclusive Canada,
Beautiful.
Which means we must seek more effective ways to shape policing.
How do you do that? That's what the Liberals do. They throw out the R word to everybody that they can. And if you disagree with it, then that's what you are.
If I could add in a comment on this, Greg Fergus here. Ms. Rapson, you're right. The shortcomings of
what do you know?
Our police services have been known to Indigenous peoples, Black Canadians, racialized people.
It has?
And I'd even argue many women's groups.
Women's groups? Women's groups? What? Okay.
Is not new.
Oh.
But what is new is precisely what John had just pointed out. And what's also new is that there's a roadmap now, because of this report, this unanimous report of parliamentarians from all walks of life, have laid out a very clear process forward.
It's so clear, guys.
To make the changes not only in the RCMP, but in police services across the country, which can be inspired by this. That's what's new. That's what's important. That's what's necessary.
Did you hear that? They set out a roadmap for the police, guys. Certain processes that they have to follow. The House Speaker just made the police look weak in Canada. We all contribute to it. Not one support from anybody. The most hated group in Canada. But when you need a cop, you ain't calling a crackhead for help. So it makes no sense to me. You want to see what this roadmap that they carved out for us? You want to see the results? This is the video that I wasn't going to post. Because I think it's a scary road to go down when you're arresting people for speech. You're arresting people for what they're saying. because Bill C-63 scares the heck out of me. That's why I'm voting for Poilievre, even though he doesn't even talk about it anymore, which is that's really worrying me. I think it's online harms bill is the worst thing possible. I don't want to see it happen. And it gives fuel if they turn around and arrest these people, which they technically should. It gives fuel. It supports that bill. Now, this is how I'm going to start the clip. Vassy has House Father on, whatever the hell his name is. And they basically both, he agrees that, well, you can't. I'll just show you. Look at the clip.
Is there anything within this designation that prevents them from, as offensive as it is, saying the stuff they're saying in a public space?
Well, again, people in Canada have a right when you don't cross the line into hate speech to say things. So that wouldn't change.
But they did cross the line and they weren't arrested. Why? Why are most people at protest not arrested now? You'll throw, and I'm going to say the name wrong, Tamara Litch in jail for mischief. I've never seen that in my entire career. You'll hold her in jail for 49 days. But you won't arrest a protester if they're not white. Why? I just showed you why. Here's my clip about Vancouver. I recommend everybody get a dictionary. My book, the book I basically grew up with, is the Criminal Code of Canada. I want to talk about this for a second. I haven't even done a video about it, but what happened in Vancouver is pretty gross. October 7th, we have a group, a hateful group, and I got to watch the words I use because I just got to watch it. They go to Vancouver, they burn a flag, whatever. But they say death to Canada, USA, in that other place. They were celebrating October 7th. Vancouver police get up and they say, oh, well, we're looking. We're trying to find out if there's charges or not.
The Vancouver Police Department now investigating to see if actions of protesters were criminal.
What they did in Vancouver was obviously unacceptable.
It is absolutely unacceptable to burn the Canadian flag and to chant death to Canada. It is also unacceptable to deny.
That's putting it lightly. It was criminal. And they need to be locked up. So I really don't understand. What is there to look into? Because it's right in front of you. It's right here. Spent 20 years on this book. Look at this goofy thing. It's all my indexes, tabs. This is a police officer's Bible. Inciting, it's a whole section on this. Inciting hatred. Section 319, everyone who, by communicating statements in a public place, incites hatred against any identifiable group where such an incitement is likely to lead to a breach of peace is guilty of indictable offense not exceeding 2 years. And back in 2001 or wherever it was, I even wrote it down. Promoting death. That's what that group was doing. And before you say, oh, but there's freedom of speech, Clint. Although this subsection infringes freedom of expression as guaranteed by Section 2 of the Charter, it constitutes a reasonable limit on that right and is therefore valid legislation. Anyways, I just wanted to come on here and talk about that before the day started. I haven't talked about it. I'm sure the Vancouver police are going to arrest. They need to arrest all of them. They need to put them on conditions so they can then breach their condition and get released again, because that's what will happen. That's what happens in Canada. Let's start the day. I know I've already put you guys to sleep. Let's get going.
All right, is that better? I need to speak to you today on the subject.
Now you need to hold the microphone back from your...
OK. Et d'habitude, on envoie 2500 à 3
I'm not getting translation. Sorry, I'm not getting translation, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Translation, because I'm not sure how to change to the French piece. So
That's the lady who runs it. These are the people that are going to sanction you, police.